Welcome back. Boston University will commemorate Indigenous Peoples Day for the first time this year, joining a growing number of universities that have elected to do the same. BU Associate Provost and Dean of Students Kenneth Elmore joins us now to discuss this change on campus and others. Thank you for joining us, Dean Elmore.
Well, thanks for having me.
So, what impact do you hope this name change will have on the campus community?
Yeah, so we are hoping that this pushes people to reflect a little bit, to think a little bit. I hope it also energizes our students and our faculty and staff who are Indigenous people, Native folk, to come together and come out and to be recognized and to do that as well. Mm-hmm. And I also hope that for those of us who may not come from that space, that we understand our role to be in fellowship and solidarity around these issues.
So in addition to the name change on campus, the school has other plans to engage the community and celebrate the culture of the Indigenous population. So tell us a little bit about what some of those plans are.
Yeah, so I think that there's this big bucket of things like reckoning and thinking on this. And this is actually, I think, part of an anti-racist kind of approach, where we're looking at racism, where we're looking at the power of words and how we celebrate and their impact long term. So we have got a anti-racist group on campus that's looking at these sorts of things. We also are going to be looking at any number of ways systematically at the institution that we push for these racist ideas and maybe make some changes and at least get some incredible conversation, discussion, debate, and argument about this.
So talk more about the responsibility that you think educators and institutions of higher learning have to course correct, if you will, teaching about Indigenous history.
Yeah, well, you said it right there. The obligation for us is the truth. We're in the business of the truth and educating people and understanding the power of words and the power of how we think about what we celebrate, what we hold out. And I think it's our job and our obligation to remind people of this, but even more so to create words and curricula and ways to think about this that are going to be accessible to the population, but most certainly to challenge our students and our faculty and staff to think about this.
BU is going through somewhat of a little controversy right now, which I know that you and university folks are addressing. Long celebrated as a hero, Miles Standish is remembered by this land's first peoples for the extreme acts of violence committed against their ancestors. Sure. So BU has a dorm, a building named after him, and some people would like to see that name changed. Talk about where the school is standing on that matter right now.
So, we certainly will entertain any proposals for changes, but those changes have to be a part of a community conversation. And also, I think, driving the community to think about this a bit. So I'll say it's part of the total reckoning that we have to have about ways that we prop people up, observances, mascots, the works. And some people may think it's a small thing to think about a name change, to think about where we get these, where it derives, where these notions of what's important derive from. They think it's small, but it is really important for us to reconsider these things, to think about these things, and to get people to understand that if we don't, we will continue to go along treating each other in these ways that are racist, that are highly problematic, and where we don't see each other as human beings.
Well, it's very interesting. I attended Boston University, and I know lots of people who stayed in the Miles Standish dorm.
Did you live there?
I didn't live there. I lived in Towers on Bay State Road, but I just never associated the name Miles Standish with this history because that's not part of my culture.
Yeah.
So for people who it is a part of their culture, as you said, it's very important.
No, so here's the thing. I think that it's a part of all of our culture, right? This is a part of how we think about who and what we are as Americans, as people of the world. And part of it is you and I, because I'm the same way, you and I grew up in a world where they didn't want us to know about this sort of stuff. We grew up in a world where they changed the pace of what we would know as the truth. And it's taken years for us to get to a point where we can understand that, yes, part of so-called discovery was also violent, it was genocidal, and it was highly problematic in terms of how we treated a human being. So I think that we are now recognizing the culture that we swim in, and it's full of these sorts of things where we are having colonizers recognized as important people worth moving forward, and that's a very Western perspective as well.
And it's part of this overall racial reckoning that we see with bringing down the statues of
That's
Robert E.
right.
Lee, changing the name of the Washington football team,
Sure,
the Cleveland
sure.
Indians to the Cleveland Guardians. You know, there's a whole shift in this area.
And I guess for us here in North America, you know, our monuments aren't these Confederate flags or these Confederate monuments, but they are probably these ways that we, I think, either intentionally or unknowingly raised up a different set of monuments and people. And we've got to deal with that and work with it as well.
All right, Dean Elmore, thank you for being here.
Thank you.